With this here, this ain't about being flashy. This is game day, son. It's only about one thing. Getting that W. That's the only thing that matters right now. Boy, you ready?
The past is the past, you know? It's a new day, bro. My day. You gotta do it now.
Welcome to Blindside Fantasy Football's podcast. Here with Matt Dugal, I'm Marcus Katkin, getting ready to talk about the quarterback changes in the NFL over the last couple weeks and how they're going to impact, everybody in fantasy this year. So let's get it started off. Matt Flynn getting traded to the Raiders. Matt, what do you think about that?
The Raiders, obviously, with Palmer just wanting to get the hell out of town, how can you blame them? They were in a little bit of a situation. We talked about this a little bit the last few weeks. We really kind of liked the potential that you see out of Terrell Pryor. He's kind of a Cam Newton type guy, obviously not on that level, but that team isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So why not give the young guy a chance? See if there is that a little bit of a chance that you get yourself a quarterback in the future. I don't know if Matt Flynn's the answer there. A couple years ago, they might have thought that going into Seattle, but I think we kind of saw he lost to a third-round quarterback. Now, Russell Wilson had a great year, so maybe it was just a case of Russell Wilson is that good, but I don't know if Matt Flynn's really the answer for the future in Oakland.
I think it's going to be great to see him lose out again to another third-round draft pick and Terrell Pryor later this year. I think that's going to be funny if Pryor in the preseason there just overtakes him again and Flynn just keeps showing over and over again, hey, new team, I'm going to get the starter, and just keeps on getting beat out. What do you think, fantasy-wise? What do you think he's going to be this year? Anything?
I'm not really excited about Flynn. What I am excited about is maybe not, like you said, maybe he loses out in the preseason, but say he holds on to the job for a little bit as the Raiders stumble as the year goes on. I think they're going to give the young guy a shot. I'd be looking forward to when Terrell Pryor kind of gets the nod, the confidence of the coaching staff. He's actually a guy I kind of had a little bit on my radar. Obviously not somebody I was drafting, but just somebody I wanted to watch. Matt Flynn, not really. I'm not excited about him. He won't be on any of my teams. Not somebody I'd recommend.
It's going to sound crazy, but I think the biggest fantasy impact of this move is Darren McFadden. I think with Flynn in there, it's going to hurt McFadden more because I think defenses are going to play up on him because they're not going to be afraid of Flynn. But I think later, when hopefully Terrell Pryor takes over, I think that's going to open things up for McFadden and kind of boost his value a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think with a mobile quarterback, you've seen it over the years. The defensive ends, the outside linebackers, they got to step that extra step out. The safeties have to hold on just a second longer before they're going to commit to the run, the pass, because of the guy that can just make things happen from the quarterback position. So you see that slight bit of extra space that really helps the running backs. I think that's a huge thing of, Alfred Morris, he's a talented player, but I think Robert Griffin really, really helped him out last year, and you've seen that over the years with other mobile quarterbacks as well.
Yeah, McCoy with Vic and everything, you really saw him really open things up for him.
Chris Johnson with Vince Young, years back.
It really just helps out that running back, and like I said, I think if Terrell Pryor beats out Flynn, that's really going to boost McFadden, if anybody else. I think all the Oakland receivers right now, just way down on my draft board. I would probably, unless it's 10th, 11th, 12th round or later, I'm probably not touching any of those guys just because I don't feel that Flynn can throw, and Terrell Pryor, I don't see it either. I like Pryor, from a running perspective for fantasy, but throwing the ball, I just can't get behind any of those receivers.
Denarius Moore has always been a guy that's kind of been exciting for me, but, that was more with Carson, a guy that would, kind of force the ball a little bit, and he was his favorite guy when he was healthy. So I agree. I'm going to stay away from any of the Oakland Raiders. If I'm looking at any of them, it's late, like you said, and it's probably Denarius Moore.
Yeah. Speaking of Carson Palmer, obviously the Raiders make this move, which makes Palmer expendable, and they kind of give him what he wants, which is out of Oakland, and doesn't fall into a better situation by any means by going to the Cardinals. Obviously, the Raiders gave up a lot to get him and aren't getting anything back, just a 7th round, conditional 7th round pick for him. Kind of funny that this year they gave up, part of their deal to get him was a 2nd round pick in this year's draft, and already he's off the team, and they don't have the pick, and that really didn't work out too much for him. But he gets a 2-year deal with the Cardinals, $16 million. The important thing I found from the deal was it's all backloaded. This year he's only got a $4 million cap. Next year it's a $10 million cap. So I think this is just a stopgap thing. I think this is hey, let's plug him in there, let's play him for a year. If he plays great, all right, let's keep him on for the second year, but more than likely, let's cut him before the beginning of next year. Let's draft a quarterback and develop him. What do you think? You think Palmer's the long-term answer?
Well, first of all, going back a few podcasts, this one kind of ruins my whole, I wanted to be like the genius guy who talked about Drew Stanton way before everyone else did. He's obviously out of the picture. But
out of the picture.
I think Palmer gives a little bit of stability there. I think you're 100% correct on the backloaded contract for sure. The thing that I really take from this Palmer thing is Larry Fitzgerald's value. I'm pumped about it. He's moving up my charts. He's going to be right up there again, more like I had him, the beginning of last year and in the year before for sure. Carson Palmer will force the ball. This is the first time he's had a real solid receiver since Chad Johnson back in Cincinnati, and you saw how those two did. I'm pumped about Larry Fitzgerald. I think he's going to be back to his old self, guy that you don't want to steer away from, like we probably talked about a few weeks ago, to steer away from.
Yeah, I got to say that this Palmer moving to the Cardinals, I've seen a lot of people actually saying, don't believe the hype, don't believe the hype. I have an article coming out probably later today that'll explain why I'm buying into the hype, why I'm buying into Carson Palmer, Larry Fitzgerald, and even Michael Floyd for maybe as a late round lottery ticket. I really think this helps Fitzgerald's value tremendously. Palmer gets to throw indoors, where historically he's done very, very well. His yards per attempt is much higher, completion percentage much higher. He likes to throw that deep ball, which Bruce Arians loves to do. I think this, Fitzgerald, 4 out of the last 6 years has been a top 5 wide receiver. Obviously last year was not one of those years, but I think now that he gets his first real quarterback since Kurt Warner, a guy who likes to throw the deep ball, a head coach that likes to throw the ball, I think this is all great stuff for Larry Fitzgerald and Michael Floyd and maybe even Andre Roberts a little bit.
I know you're excited about Michael Floyd. Not that you're going to be taking him real early or anything, but for me, it's really about the guy has all the physical tools. He's big, he's strong, he's fast. He can go up and get the ball. You saw some catches last year that displayed that, but he's very raw coming out of Notre Dame. It seems like it was hard for him to grasp things last year. So it's really about what kind of work he put in this offseason. And from all accounts, he's a hardworking, good kid. So there is definitely the possibility this is going to be one of those, who's a breakout type wide receiver. Michael Floyd could be one of those guys, especially when you get a guy like Larry Fitzgerald on the other side of the ball. Obviously,
it's going to open things up for him.
The safeties are rolling his side of the field. You got to leave Michael Floyd to kind of let him do his thing and prove that he can produce when Larry Fitzgerald's on the opposite side of the ball. So
yeah, and like
opposite side of the field. Sorry.
Yeah, and like I said, to a lesser extent, Andre Roberts had a very solid year last year, even despite the 4 different quarterbacks the Cardinals used. So you got to account for him too, and I think it's really just going to open things up for all of them. Actually, when I was analyzing Larry Fitzgerald for that article that I wrote, I found it interesting that he had his lowest yards per catch out of his last, I think it was like 4 or 5 years, and his yards after the catch was one of the lowest he's had in the last 5 years. So it really shows you that the defenses were playing up. They weren't buying into those quarterbacks. The safeties were playing up. Not giving Fitzgerald the room he needed to get open, and then even after he caught the ball, not giving him the big running lanes that he needs. I think Palmer, with his deep throwing ability, it's really going to open things up for them. Might help out the Arizona running game a little bit, but I'm really not buying into the Arizona running game at all. I know you like Mendenhall. They drafted Ryan Williams for a reason. The Mendenhall thing kind of muddles things up a little bit. I'm probably staying away from the Arizona backfield, but the Arizona receivers and Carson Palmer, I'm definitely all in on. And I think Fitzgerald ends up a top 5 wide receiver again this year. And Palmer, I think, is going to be a sneaky guy to maybe finish in the top, 10 or 12 quarterbacks.
The thing that scares me about Arizona, with the running game and with Palmer, a guy who's kind of, obviously pretty turnover prone, is that offensive line. They're terrible.
I
think it's
the worst in the league. Yeah.
And I watched.
Second worst in the league was the Raiders. So
yeah.
Palmer didn't help himself at all by going to the Cardinals.
He's going from a bad situation, and really the biggest thing he's improving, I think, is the wide receivers he's throwing the ball to. He produced last year. I think it should be a little bit better this year. And like you said, Arians' scheme is really going to fit into what Carson Palmer can excel at.
There's been a lot of buzz about Barkley going to the Cardinals this year, and I think this deal kind of is putting those pieces together. I think the backloaded contract, this is going to allow the Cardinals and Bruce Arians to go out and get somebody like Matt Barkley, develop him for a year, maybe start him a couple games towards the end of the year, and then cut Palmer at the end of the year. I think this is it is just totally, it looks to be the way they're going with this.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one for sure.
They do like to throw the ball in Arizona, though. The indoors thing I think helps. Last year, even with 4 different quarterbacks, they still combined for almost 3,400 yards. So I think, the wide receivers, like I said, are still going to have that production, and even more so with Carson Palmer. So I just like everything in Arizona except for that running game.
In the stats you mentioned about Larry, he is only 29 years old right now. He's never been much of a blazer. He's a 4.5 type guy, 40-yard dash. He's obviously more about size and strength and his just ability to get open and go up and get the ball. So I'm not worried about Larry. I don't think anything at all with his production was because of him. I think it was all about those 4 pathetic quarterbacks that were thrown to him. And actually one of those guys that was thrown to him last year was Kevin Kolb. He's actually now in Buffalo on a 2-year, $13 million deal. He's going to be competing with Tavares Jackson. Flip a coin, really, who cares which one gets the job? Neither one of them really proved much of anything. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Tavares Jackson gets this job.
I think this is another situation just like the Cardinals where they're getting themselves ready to draft a quarterback.
Yeah.
Again, it's a short-term deal, not a lot of money, not a lot of risk. It was a free agent move, didn't cost them a draft pick, although, like I said, with the Cardinals, it only cost them a 7th-round pick. Not a lot of risk. So it's just one of those things where they're setting themselves up to draft that quarterback in the 1st round, maybe early 2nd round if they think they can hold out on their guy. But I think they could end up with like a Geno Smith or a E.J. Manuel maybe in the 2nd round, that type of thing. But yeah, this is another situation where I'm staying away from those quarterbacks just because, Kevin Kolb did look good last year in the limited time that he played. He did well with what he had available to him. But I see the Bills maybe focusing on that running game this year. C.J. Spiller, Fred Jackson, and I just can't get excited about Kevin Kolb.
Not at all. Or Tavares, whoever ends up under center in that team. The only guy I'm really looking forward to there is C.J. Spiller and see what kind of campaign he's going to put on this year.
Yeah, I actually read earlier this week that C.J. Spiller had the same amount of fantasy points per touch as Adrian Peterson last year.
Wow.
And I found that to be significant considering the year that Peterson had last year.
He's explosive. Just can he stay healthy? And I'll make a little side note here since we're talking about the Bills. Stevie Johnson, I really didn't appreciate your tweet the other day talking about North Korea, and hey, if you are going to be nuking, send it over to Foxborough, Mass. I live a little too close for that, so
wow, that is
watch what
that
you
is
say.
a little out there. I didn't see that, but wow, that's definitely not cool.
We'll move on. Ryan Fitzpatrick leaving the Bills. I like how we're doing this here, and going over to the Titans as a free agent.
Yeah, he's the backup. Obviously, it's apparently they're moving forward with Jake Locker. I don't think Fitzpatrick's going to be pushed. Maybe he pushes him a little bit for the starting role, but I don't think he really has a shot at it. I think this is all depth, and I think Fitzpatrick knows it. I don't think they, set him up with the, hey, come in and you can, push to be the starter. I think he knows his role, and he's going to be fine with it.
Yep.
I honestly didn't think Fitzpatrick did that bad for the Bills when he played for them, and I was kind of surprised that he's been regulated to a backup role, but
I think it's just always been a case that they were down a lot, so he put up the numbers. I don't really like his talent there. He's got a good arm, I guess, but other than that, I don't know. Like you said, he's a backup. I think they did bring in he's a good backup though for sure. He's a veteran that's had some success in the league. He's a guy that can probably help Locker develop, but also a guy that's going to make Locker need to improve because if he doesn't, Fitzpatrick can come in and he can win games in the NFL. So Locker can't just sit there thinking, all right, this is my job now. Hasselbeck was obviously a guy who was getting up there in age, but really, could produce and was just a true professional. So Fitzpatrick, it's good to have a nice backup in the NFL. You never know what's going to happen. So good pickup there. Is obviously not really any implications as far as what we talk about fantasy football.
No. Speaking of not much fantasy relevance, Jason Campbell goes to the Browns. I like Jason Campbell, but too. I don't see him pushing Brandon Weeden for the starting role. Kind of surprised by this move because I thought they would have gone out and gotten a quarterback that really would have pushed Brandon Weeden for the starting role. Maybe traded for Ryan Mallett, that type of thing. Nick Foles, maybe even potentially draft another quarterback again. I'm just really surprised that Jason Campbell was the guy that they went out, targeted, and thought, yep, this is the guy we want to push our starter or be the backup. What do you think?
Well, the funny thing here is we're talking about a second-year player in Whedon, and what is there, about a year or two age difference between...
Yeah, I think it was 2 years. I looked it up. It's like 18 or 19 months. It's pretty crazy.
I don't know. Whedon showed some signs last year, but he's not a guy. He's 28, 29 years old. It's not a guy. He's older. It's just weird to see a guy coming in the league like that. I think the last one I remember was like a Chris Wenke. He's not a guy that's going to be 21, 22 that you expect to develop just with pure age and time. So is Whedon really going to get that much better? Is he kind of already at his peak? I mean, as a man, he's pretty much in his physical prime. So obviously the schemes and things are something that he's going to improve on. But yeah, I could see Jason Campbell, if Whedon doesn't improve this year, I could see him eventually getting a shot at least. But neither one of them is a guy that I'm going to look to at all in fantasy. Unless, Whedon does take that next step. He showed a few signs of that last year for sure. Looks like a talented guy. But either one of them.
So I think Whedon was just the guy that last year got way too overhyped,
yep.
And it just caused the Browns to really just go, we need a quarterback. Let's take him. And it's kind of like the Tim Tebow thing when he was drafted with the Broncos. The hype caused the team to way overdraft him. And then that year or two later, they realized, wow, this was not the guy we should have taken. What do we do now? Like I said, I don't think Campbell pushes him. I don't think either guy really has any fantasy relevance.
No.
If anything, I think for some reason I feel like Campbell would help out Trent Richardson a little bit more if he was the starter, because I think at least defenses would respect him a little bit more and not play as up on him.
I've had enough Jason Campbell talk today. Let's move on to the next quarterback that I really don't give a shit about. He left the Browns. He's now in San Francisco. Colt McCoy, he was traded. The Niners actually gave up a 5th and a 7th. They got back McCoy and a 6th. He's a backup quarterback. Kind of fits the mold as Kaepernick as far as an athletic guy. Obviously, Kaepernick's in a world of his own in that regard. But Colt McCoy is actually a pretty good athlete back in Texas University, and he hasn't really performed like everyone was hoping. He was a winner. He was a coach's son. They really had some high hopes for him in the NFL, as did I. But he doesn't have the arm. He doesn't have the arm to make all the throws in the NFL that you need to make. So I don't mind it as a backup. He's a guy you can plug in. He can possibly win you a few games, especially with that defense. He's not a big mistake-prone type guy. But we're talking about a backup quarterback, not anything in fantasy relevance. Marcus, you got anything else to talk about with Colt?
Well, I mean, obviously this helps Colt McCoy's fantasy value because before it was non-existent, and now, he's maybe on life support.
Yeah.
He was dead before and now on life support. But the thing that surprised me was the 49ers going out and getting Colt McCoy. He doesn't fit what Kaepernick does. And we haven't seen enough from Kaepernick to know whether or not he's durable enough to withstand a full season. So I found it surprising that this was the guy that the 49ers wanted to have as the backup. This was the guy that they said, you know what? Kaepernick's played a total of 10 games, including the postseason, and we don't know how well he's going to hold up to a full season, but this is the guy we want to back him up. This is the guy we want to be the first one off the bench if Kaepernick is running the ball, takes a shot, has to come out of the game for a few snaps. I just, from that perspective, I don't really get it. I think in dynasty leagues, this helps him tremendously because, like I said, we don't know how well Kaepernick's going to hold up to getting hit. And before, Colt McCoy had just no value at all, just nothing, even in the deepest of dynasty leagues. And now I think at least he has a little bit of a heartbeat because he could potentially start, 1 or 2 games a year if Kaepernick ends up, hurting himself, RG3 type style because of the way he plays. I don't think it was a good move for the 49ers. I just totally don't understand that at all.
I don't think their book is closed on who the backup's going to be. I mean, they gave up a 5th and a 7th, so it's not like they gave up much to get him. No. He was never surrounded with anything as far as talent in Cleveland, so there's a big difference here in San Francisco as far as the guys he gets to throw to.
You think they brought him in as the third stringer?
No, I don't. I'm just saying, they could. I'm sure they're going to bring in other guys, and it's not like he's been handed the backup job. The possibility, though, that
yeah, I mean, if you're only moving, I guess a fifth and a seventh, and getting back a sixth, I guess you could try him out in the preseason. If he doesn't work out, cut him, type of thing.
Well, I think they'll keep him. I mean, Colt's a young guy. He's going to work hard in the classroom. He's going to get the scheme down. He's going to be a good backup, a kind of guy that can help out in the meetings. He's just. I don't think the book is completely closed on him. It's pretty much, but I liked him a lot coming out of school, and I think he was really set up for failure in Cleveland. So,
big thing here is even with giving up the 2 picks and getting back a player and 1 pick back, the 49ers still have 13 picks in this upcoming draft. That is a ton of picks.
Right.
Obviously a first-round pick, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, 2 fourths. They don't really have a lot of holes in their team. As bad as this draft is talent-wise, I think they're obviously the best contender to trade up, to package a couple of those picks together and trade up. I don't know what they'd be trading up for because there isn't too many glaring holes. Obviously, when you win the NFC Championship, there's not too many holes in your team. But what do you think they do in the draft? Anything?
Fifth and seventh they gave up to get Colt McCoy. Like I said, the book hasn't been closed. Maybe a little later round quarterback in the draft. A guy that can maybe compete as a backup. They're going to be looking, I think.
Do you think they draft a running back? Do you think? Frank Gore's getting older. They drafted LaMichael James, but I personally don't see LaMichael James as an every down back. Do you think they draft another running back?
I could see him taking a bigger guy, someone more like a Frank Gore type.
Well, actually,
LaMichael James is definitely one of those scat back type guys. He's not a guy they can give the ball to. And Kendall Hunter, he's another guy who's small. He's a little bit different build than LaMichael. He's a little bit bigger in that regard. But
here's the question: they have the 31 and 34th overall picks. If Eddie Lacy is still there that late,
no,
do you take him?
I don't think so. They've got a pretty good stable there. You can always work on offensive line in that regard. I don't see taking a running back in the first round when you've got who they have on their team. But like you said, Frank Gore is getting older. But it seems like you've been saying that. We've been saying that for years now. He keeps producing. They've got it's a lot of guys in the NFL today. They're going to that running back by committee, and they've got a really nice mix of what Frank Gore can do well, what Michael James can do well, what Hunter can do well. I don't think they're going to really need to get a running back, and if they do, it's going to be a third, fourth round type, something like that.
All right. Moving on in non-transaction-wise NFL news here. Tony Romo and his extension, 6 years, $108 million. Obviously, that doesn't affect his fantasy value, but it obviously gets us back and looking at him, in the off season here. What do you think? Worth the money? Worth $108 million?
There's been people's beliefs on this are all over the board. For me, I like Tony Romo. I really do. I actually got some neat stats to kind of just talk about to kind of let everyone know why I really like Tony. Some guys in Cowboys history, you think of Aikman, Staubach. They were the greats. Career quarterback rating for Aikman 81.6, Staubach 93.4. You'd be surprised to know Tony Romo actually has the second highest in the career of anybody in the NFL, not just the Cowboys, of a 95.6 quarterback rating. That's pretty impressive with, obviously, the history of the game. He's got 13 fourth-quarter comebacks. He's got 14 game-winning drives. In the fourth quarter, everyone talks about how he just can't do it in the big games. He does it in some big moments. 104.4 quarterback rating in the fourth quarter for his career. He, hasn't won the big games yet, and that's really the thing. That's the only thing on his resume he doesn't have. And I think once he gets that, it's going to be like the LeBron James. Obviously not on that level of last year, where that's what it was. He put up the numbers for years, but never came up in the big moment. Now that he has. He's talked about as, is he better than Michael? Is he better than Kobe? It's similar, I think, with Romo. He's got the numbers there to back it. If he can just get one of those big games, those big wins, I'm talking Super Bowl, obviously. I think Romo could go down as one of the greatest, probably maybe right up there with the Aikman and Staubachs for Cowboys history.
I'm not saying that I would pay Romo $108 million, but I understand it.
Yeah.
If I had to pick between Romo and Flacco, I'm going Romo.
Yeah.
And the other, I think the big thing here is somebody was going to pay Romo that kind of money.
Yeah,
you know,
saw the money thrown at Flacco. The quarterback market has just gone nuts.
Yeah, it just. I mean, if he let's say he goes and somebody like Jacksonville, I mean, they would have paid him $108 million a year, easy.
Yep.
But let's say that happens and you're Dallas. Now, what do you do?
Right,
You don't want to be the new Buffalo Bills looking for a quarterback every year or playing with whoever you can. You know, the Titans. You know, so many teams out there that just. The Jaguars, you know, that just every year it seems they're getting a different quarterback and just, you know, have one of those early round picks because they just can't get it done. So I'm not saying I would pay Romo $108 million, but I definitely understand it.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, I mean, his fantasy numbers actually have been pretty well over the last couple of years. Would never have guessed that he was 97 yards shy last year, 5,000 yards passing.
Right.
That amazes me. I don't see Tony Romo as a 5,000 yard passer, but obviously he is. And I mean, 28 touchdowns last year, 31 the year before. Obviously, he's a decent fantasy quarterback. He might be one of those guys that if you're doing a quarterback by committee and you're looking at him in the 7th, 8th round and he's still there, you might you want to take a shot at him.
Right. We always talk about letting the quarterbacks fall. He's a guy that if I get him in the 7th, 8th, 9th round, I'm happy. I'm good with that. I've surrounded him with a lot of
He's
other
solid.
good players, obviously, that I've taken earlier, and I'm okay going to every Sunday with Tony Romo as my quarterback. And then, like you said, too, maybe a quarterback by committee. Every year there's guys all over the free agency that when you need that bye-week fill-in, even if you need that injury, there's a guy who knows, Terrell Pryor, second half of the year type guy. Russell Wilson, he performed a lot better as the season went on. Guys that you can kind of just pick up and roll with. But I think Romo's a guy that you're going to be just fine with if he's your quarterback. Obviously, he's not elite, but I don't think he's that far behind. Everybody will talk. Aikman. He won the big games. Romo hasn't had the Cowboys that you remember back when they were the dream team around.
Yeah, he doesn't have an Emmitt Smith.
Emmitt Smith, and the line that was just full of all pros, and Romo's been the one that's had to deal with Jerry Jones getting older, and I think losing it over more and more every year. The guy just has to have his fingers on everything.
Turning into your Jerry Buss of the Lakers.
Yeah, Jerry Buss did a great job the whole time. He's more like the Al Davis of the Raiders, I think.
Yeah, Al Davis is definitely another crazy one.
I like Romo for sure. The money was quite a bit with half guaranteed, but like you said, what were they going to do? Let him go and someone else would have scooped him up? Yeah. No question about it. And then they would have been the Bills of the league, the Browns of the league, where they're just every year trying to fill in. The Vikings, my team of the league, where it's trying to find that quarterback. Quarterback's a huge position in the NFL, so you got to lock up when you've got a guy like Tony Romo who has been very, very solid.
So in our only non-quarterback news, breaking news today was kind of that Rob Gronkowski, according to the Boston Herald, looks like he may, the start of his season may be in doubt after a fourth forearm surgery due to an infection. Obviously we're going to know more by the time drafts come around, but what is this? How does this affect your value of Rob Gronkowski?
From what I know, I think the infection was something that they've been working on for the last 6 weeks with antibiotics and stuff, and they kind of have to go in, get the plate out, and see if the infection's gone. If he is going to be out in the beginning of the year, I'm excited and hoping he's fallen for me a couple more rounds than I would have needed to draft him.
A couple more. God, if he falls a couple more rounds, I'm grabbing him too.
Absolutely. I'm hoping that guys are going to be scared of it. I'm still going to take him. Definitely. There's so many tight ends that I can just deal with for, 3-4 weeks. Like you said, we don't really know. It's all speculation right now. But if he falls, I'm going to be clapping my hands and drafting him.
If you're drafting right now for this upcoming season, Jimmy Graham or Rob Gronkowski?
Right now, it's going to be Jimmy Graham. He's healthy, but we'll talk about it. I think as the season gets a little closer. What about you? Yeah,
we'll know a lot more. I think I'm still going Gronkowski because I think he's going to be ready. And if he's not ready, how many weeks is he going to miss? 1, 2, right. Maybe 3.
Who knows?
I think if
you're talking 3 though, then you're starting to say, maybe Jimmy Graham. 3 games.
Three maybe.
The beginning of the season, you're playing for the playoffs, but you want to get those wins whenever you can. So as close as they are, if you're going to miss 3 games and you know that going into the season, I think that has to move Jimmy Graham ahead of as Gronkowski for me. Yeah, it will. And like I said, we'll definitely know more as we get towards August and things. We'll even know more in the next probably couple days, right? Let alone by then. But I think that does it for this podcast.
Don't forget to check us out on Twitter. You can follow Matt at Matt Dugal. You can follow me, Marcus Katkin, at Marcus Katkin. Also check out the Blindside Football Twitter account. It's Blindside FTBALL. That's Blindside FT Ball. Also, if you have questions for us you want to hear on the podcast, feel free to hashtag BlindsidePod and send us some of your questions, and we'll answer them. So until next time, guys, we'll see you later.
See ya.